Good evening and welcome back to our weekly question and answer series for Anash.org. Question. In the beginning of COVID, we made a magbis. We collected money in our shul to pay for 2 levayas. If the magbis brought in more money than we needed, can I use the extra money for different tzedukahs in shul? Like making weddings or give it for the unemployed, etc. Or does it have to be used for levayas? Now, in Shechanurach, Halacha Tzedukah, Yeredaya Simet Tuf Kifni in Gimel Sivuv, the Mechaber writes, Uni Shiguviloi, a poor person which they collected money for him, in order that he should have whatever he needs, and there was extra, they collected more money than he needs, the rest of it is his. Goes for that only. If they collected for Bechalal for a niyam, for poor people, and they gave for the poor people and there's extra, they should save it for other poor people. And the same will go to a mess. A person dies and you collected money for his burial and there's extra money, you give it for his yorshim. If you collected Bechalal for Maisam, for people who died, not for a specific mass, then you give it and you keep it for other Maisam. And the Mechaber ends, if the Gabua Tzedukah feels it's a Tzoyrich Shu to take the money for other Tzedukahs, you could change it for other Tzedukahs, and not for L'Tzoyrich Rishis. So, regarding your question, it depends for what reason they collected it. If they collected it for specific 2 people, for 2 nifturim, and there's extra money, then you have to give it for their yorshim. But if you collected it b'chlulius, overall, to pay for 2 levayas, which will be through COVID, so therefore, if there is leftovers, you don't give it for their yorshim, you give it for other people who needs it for levayas. Only in a case which the Gabbai Tzedukah feels it's a tzorich shu to take the money for other tzedukahs, you could take it. But if it's not a tzorich shu, has to go for levayas for other people. Question. I would like to buy lunch for my employers. Can I give them my credit card and they will buy non-kosher food? The Alter Rebbe in Hilchas Pesach, Arachaim Simetuf Lian, Sif Yites and Sif Chof, writes, a person is permitted to give money for his employer. He should go buy lunch. Although we know that he's going to buy chomutz, and now it's Pesach, it's not a problem because you don't tell him to buy chomutz. You give him money, he should buy lunch. If he buys chomutz, has nothing to do with me. And even though if you're certain he's going to buy chomutz, it's still not a problem because when the employer gets food, it's not considered a hanor for his employee. When a person has an animal and you give him chomutz in Pesach, that's considered a hanor because it's your animal. But if you have an employer, it's not considered a hanor, and therefore he could buy whatever he wants and you could pay for it. And that will be also if you tell him you buy lunch and I will pay it afterwards. That's not a problem. But the Alter Rebbe says you cannot give money for your employer and you tell him, here you have money and go buy a bagel. Because when you tell him what to buy and you tell him to buy chomutz, although he buys it for himself, but it is as if he buys it b'shlichus from his employee, and therefore you cannot, it looks like shlichus, and therefore you cannot tell him, give him money and tell him, go buy a bagel. And the poskim connect this halacha to buying non-kosher food. So regarding a question, there is no problem, you give for your employer money and you tell them, go buy a lunch, and although you know they're going to buy non-kosher food, it's not none of your business, it's not your problem. Or you give them the credit card and they're going to buy and you're going to pay for it. It's not a problem. If you give them money, you said, go to McDonald's and buy a cheeseburger, that's an Isser. But if you give them money, or even if you don't give them money, you tell them you could buy and charge it on my credit card, it's not a problem. You could also not do, give money and tell for that restaurant, here they have money, and then all the lunches which my employer will buy, the non-kosher food which they're going to buy, I'm going to pay. That's also not permitted, because that's as if you bought it directly. Since you paid beforehand and you told for the employer, go to that restaurant and buy lunch over there, since you paid beforehand, it's usher. But giving them money or giving them the credit card and they should buy lunch wherever they want, it is not a problem, and they could buy on your expense. If we talk about this question, let me just mention that when it comes before Thanksgiving, a lot of people want to buy for their non-Jewish employer a turkey. Now, buying a non-kosher turkey and giving it for your employer is a problem, because it is like you doing business with non-kosher food, and a Jew is not permitted to do business with non-kosher food. So you cannot buy a non-kosher turkey and give it for your employer. You could buy a turkey which has some kind of hechsher, although you don't rely on it, but since it has some kind of hechsher, and it's cheaper, you could buy it, but you cannot buy a non-kosher turkey and give it for your employer, because that's mischer schoire bedvurim asirim. Question: if I see my friend has a new kitchen gadget in their home, and I go home and purchase it online or in a store for myself, am I over of the Isser of Lo Sachmet, that you should not envy someone else's property? Bes Yosef Mechoshe Mishpat Simashini in Tess brings down the Mechilta, which the Mechilta says, when the Torah says Lo Sachmoit, a person would think that even bedvurim there's a problem of Lo Sachmoit. That means if you see something else by someone else and it says I would like to buy it, it's a problem. So the Bechilta finishes, the Pasuk says, the Sachmat Kesef Zuaf, Velakachtu Lechu. The Isser of Lo Sachmat is only when you do a Masa. Velakachtu Lechu, you have to do a Masa. You have to do something. What is considered a Masa which is a problem? We have three Shittas of Rishonim. The Shittas of Toysus in Sanhedrin Daf Chuf Hei Umat Beis is the most lenient. It says the Isser of Lesachmet is only if a person goes and steals that thing from his friend, then you're over Lesachmet. But if you didn't steal it, you're not over Lesachmet. The Shittas, the Ravet, in Hilchas Gezeile, Perek Alav Aluchates, writes that even if you don't steal it, you pay money for the item which you took. But you took it without that person is ready to sell it. That means you forced him to sell. You took it, although you paid for the item, but since the person who owns it did not agree to sell it to you, and you do it forcefully, that's also considered lesachmat and is osar. The Shittas Rambam is the most chumer. He holds that that even if he agrees to sell it, but he agrees to sell it only when you pressure him, even with words, or sending people to ask him he should sell it, or keep on nudging him that he should sell it. If you wouldn't have nudged him, he wouldn't have sold it. That's also considered lesachmut. And this is how the Shulchan Aruch paskens in Choshe Mishpat Simashini in Tasiv Yid, that even if you paid for the item, and even if in the end that guy agreed to sell it, but since he sells it only because you nudged him, you're over of lesachmut. But seeing an item of someone else's house and going out and purchasing it in a store or online, according to all the shittas, it's not a problem of lesachmut, since you did not do any maisa. So to answer your question, it is no problem to purchasing and buying stuff which you see in somebody else's house and you didn't ask them, they should sell it to you. Question. When I was emptying out my pishke in my house, I noticed on the bottom it says that the contents of this pushka are to be donated to a specific organization. I did not have this intention when putting in the money. Can I still give the money elsewhere, or can I still use the pushka further with the intention to give the money elsewhere? Now, first we have to discuss if a moisdus gives you a pushka, a tzedukah box, an organization gives you a tzedukah box, if the money which you put in is automatically belongs for the moised. The Shach, according to the Shach says that when a person has a keli, a person wants to buy an item, he goes into a store and the storekeeper gives the item, puts in the item in the keli, in the basket of the koina, of the guy who wants to buy it. So the basket belongs for the person who wants to buy the item, but it is in the house of the seller. That means the keli is the koina, but it's bebaisoi shel hamoicher. So the Shach holds that once you put it into the basket which belongs to the purchaser, automatically the guy who buys the item, it's his. He was koinate. Therefore, when it comes to our situation, the box belongs for the organization. Although it's in your house, it's keli shel hakoina, but bebais hamoicher, it belongs for the organization, and all the money which you put in goes automatically for the organization. They were koinate. But the Nesiva, Choshe Mishpat Siman Dalet, disagrees with the Shach, and he holds that even though that you put it in the basket which belongs for the koina, but since it is in the house of the moicher, it still belongs for the moicher and not for the koina. So in your scenario, in your case, although you put it in the basket, in the pushka, in the tzedukah box which belongs for the organization, but since it's in your house, it does not belong for the organization, it belongs for you. That means where you want to give it. That's first of all. Second of all, it depends if that organization ever came to pick it up. Because a lot of poskim hold that a tzedukah pishka, a charity box, which is in your house a long time, and the organization never came to collect the money, you have the right to take the money and give it for any moised, any organization which you desire. Because it is as if the moised was already in Siyash. So in your case, I don't know if the organization ever tried to asking to come pick up the money and to collect the money, or they didn't. If they didn't come pick up the money, and especially if you try to call them and they didn't come, the money does not belong for that organization. You could give it to anywhere you want to give it. And even if it's not a long time, we still have the Nesivas, which holds it could be given to any moises which you want. Furthermore, over here you did not realize Bechlal belongs for an organization. So it could also be, it's called Hegdish Betuas, that we gave the money for that moises Betuas, so therefore you're not koina. So if at least it's a long time which the moises did not come pick it up, for sure you could give it for other organization, and you don't have to give it for that organization which the Pishke belongs. Now, to use this Pushka furthermore, from now on, it depends. If it's a long time by you and they never came to pick it up, so according to the Poiskem, which is the Tzedukah Mishpat, Rabbi Yankov Bloy, the Tzitzieliezer Chalik Tezayin, Simon Paites, the Bayer Surim, and other Poiskem which hold that if it's an organization which does not come pick up collect the money, so the bucks, so then it's as if they are Nisiyash, they gave up on it, so also they were Nisiyash or some Tzedukah bucks. So if it's such a scenario, you could use the Tzedukah Pishka from now on for any Tzedukah which you want to give it. If it's not in such a scenario and they will come pick it up, it's not kedai to use their Tzedukah box, because after all we have the Shach which says that the money belongs for that organization. Question: when can you put earrings for a baby girl? Is there a thing to wait till a certain age? I heard till she asks. Is there a source for this? And the answer is there's no source for such a thing, and you could put on and make earrings for your baby girl whenever you desire. There's a letter of the Rebbe which is published in Shulchan Menachem, Chaylik Zayin Simel Amates, which somebody asked the Rebbe regarding making earrings for a child, and the Rebbe writes that making earrings, a thing which is mentioned already in Nach, that Jewish women used to have earrings, it's a normal thing, and we see it also Sheikh Norach Recham Simon Gimel. And for sure, the enjoyment which a person has by having earrings is much bigger and overweighs the tiny drop of tsar, of pain, which he has making the hole. So therefore, it's mutter. And there's no mention any gil, any age when you should make, when you should not make, and you can make it whenever you desire to do that earrings. Question: lately it became a style to have leather tefillin bags and leather talis bags. Is it considered a hider mitzvah or not? Also, is a silver esrik box a hider mitzvah or not? The Rebbe had the plain box, however he had the silver Megillah case. Or is hider mitzvah only if you mahader, you make nice the mitzvah itself, and not the bag in which you put in the mitzvah? It's a very good question. We see in the Poiskem, we see in the Rishonim already, the Orchos Chaim from Rabbi Aaron Melinel in Hilchas Tefillin Sifid writes, quote, you should know that the holiness of Tefillin is very big, very great, and the case which you put in the Tefillin has a Kedusha, and therefore you should not put in stuff which is not holy. And this is very important to know, because some people have things in their pocket, and before they daven, they empty out their pockets and they put it into their talis bag. You cannot do that. It's asur. Since the talis bag has a kedusha, so you cannot put in stuff which is not kedusha. It's schoil. We see in Sefer Chassidim, Simon Kif Chuftes, Kabed es Havai Mahinchu. Shlomo Melech says in Mishli, you should be machabed the Rebbeinu Shloilem from your money. And he says, the same as you have a nice box to put in your silverware and your gold, you should buy a nice box to put in your books and your tefillin. So we see that even the tefillin bag is also a thing of Hider Mitzvah. The Mekar Chaim from the Chavis Yuer in Orach Chaim Simach Chuf Ches Osbais writes, quote, the bag of the talis and tefillin should be nice and beautified, because that goes also into the gather of Hisnui Lefunav B'mitzvahs. And we see in Gemara Masechta Soita, Daf Yidalot Amud Beis, that even the keli which they brought the mincha has to be nice and cannot be some junk. So to answer your question, yes, there is Hider Mitzvah also by a tefillin bag and a talis bag. Now, for sure, you should not spend excess amount of money for this thing, and you should spend more on the tefillin itself. But if you want to know if there is Hider Mitzvah on the tefillin bag and a talis bag, yes, we see from the Rishonim that there is Hider Mitzvah also on the tefillin and the talis bag. Okay, thank you for joining us, and please join us next week again, and send in your questions to inbox@Anash.org, and we'll hopefully come to all your questions in the near future. Good night and have a wonderful week.